When I was younger, I was enthralled with scuba diving. It was something that my father did, and so naturally I wanted to do it too. One day I designed a way in which I could accomplish this in the pool. The little engineer in me was already beginning to take shape. I decided that if I deflated a beach ball enough that it could partially be submerged as I held the nozzle in my mouth, I could then breathe the air from that beach ball without ever having to lift my head up above the water. Pretty ingenious, huh? Well, I thought so. But of course, there was a design flaw that became pretty immediately apparent during that maiden test run. If you use a beach ball as your air tank, you will suffocate. There is no fresh air coming in. It's a closed system. Okay, granted, admittedly, it was not my most brilliant hour. But the problem isn't so much that we try something new and it fails. The greater problem is, having once failed, we keep trying it, as if it's going to change, as if the outcomes are going to improve. A complementary image was given to the Jews by God, written into their very geography. It's an image that I so often turn to because it is perfect. In the north, you have the life-giving, fresh, blue-green waters of the Sea of Galilee, versus in the south, there is the life-taking, salty, gray waters of the Dead Sea. What is the difference? That for the Sea of Galilee, the waters flow through it. What comes in, goes out. But for the Dead Sea, the waters flow in, and there they remain, becoming stagnant, stale, and stinky. If nothing flows in, suffocation. If nothing flows out, stagnation. This dilemma is being played out in our first reading from the Acts of the Apostles. And there the apostles are realizing that there's a little bit of a design flaw in the church as it is undergoing its maiden journey. They're experiencing rapid growth as more and more disciples, more and more outsiders are joining their ranks. And they realize that they cannot both attend to the word, the prayer, and the sacraments on one hand, and also attend to the increasing needs of the community on the other. If they focus solely on their priestly ministry, yes, new graces would flow in, but like the Dead Sea, there they would remain. They wouldn't experience any new growth, and the growth that they had already experienced would soon wither. However, on the other hand, they couldn't solely focus on their pastoral ministry either. Yes, maybe for a time they would be able to serve the needs of that community. They would be able to feed them, clothe them, and house them. But soon thereafter, like the beach ball, they would find themselves depleted and exhausted because their reserves were not being renewed. They were not being replenished. And so they determined to continue on with the ministry that had been entrusted to them so that they could ensure the one, while at the same time ordaining these 7 men as deacons so that they could ensure the other. Graces flow in, graces flow out. No closed system, no suffocation, no stagnation. What is true of the church must also be true of her members. It is only true of the whole if it is then first true of its parts. Only by turning to the Lord are we able to breathe in that fresh air. Are we able to receive that which is life-giving? Otherwise, we are going to suffocate. We may, for a time, be able to succeed by our own efforts and our own abilities. We may be able to scurry about and do much good. But eventually, we will find ourselves spent, exhausted, completely empty. And even the good things that we do will build within us irritation and frustration. But then, having received it, we then need to turn and then give it away. What we have received, we then give, allowing the life to flow through us. Otherwise, we stagnate and not allowing those gifts to attain their purpose, which is to be given away, to be shared with others, that others may then experience the life and the beauty that we have first received. The life of every Christian must begin at the altar, because that is the place where Jesus Christ comes down. And like a stone that is dropped within a puddle, causes ripples to emanate ever outwards. That first, most inner ripple is something personal. It is our personal encounter with the Lord. It is exercising the means by which that relationship, that intimacy can deepen. Receiving communion with a greater reverence and intentionality. Spending more time in adoration so that we can look at him and that he can look at us, so that we can hear and understand his voice. The second, or that middle ripple, is parochial. It is building up this community of St. Paul. It is strengthening and supporting the members as if they are real members of a real family, and yet doing it in a way that is always centered around the faith. That third, or that most outward ripple or circle, is peripheral. Taking what we have received and then bringing it out into the world. A world that is so often neglected, a world that is starving, a world that is troubled. The renewal, the rebuilding of all things begins with Jesus Christ in the Eucharist, and then builds like one block upon another. First personal, then parochial, then peripheral, until that spiritual living house is complete. This is how the divine architect designed it. Any other plan will fail. Any other plan will ultimately fall. 2,000 years ago, Jesus walked upon this earth in order to reveal the face of the Father, in order to teach the way to him. We only see that face. We only know that way because those to whom it was first given then turned and gave it to us. But will that continue from here, or will it cease? You are now the chosen race. You are now the royal priesthood. You are now the holy nation, the people God has claimed as his own, to announce those good gifts which you have received to the world out there. The bridge between God and man is founded on Jesus Christ, but it is built up first by the apostles and the disciples, and now built up by us. That responsibility is ours. To be a part of that bridge, there are risks. Risks of being rejected by that world, the same world that rejected its founder. But there are also risks if we're not a part of it. The risks of suffocation and stagnation. The risks of spiritual death. We live in the midst of a world that is troubled and needs to see the face of God. We live in the midst of a world that is lost and needs to know the way. But they cannot see that face, and they cannot know that way unless those who have first seen it show them, and those who have first learned it teach them. The societal and the cultural revival begins with the Eucharistic revival. It begins here, and it begins here.